Okay, so not only did they finally confirm that Max is alive and trapped inside Vecna's mind, but they also showed us what Henry's biggest fear is. Max tells us what happened after the finale of Season 4 when Vecna breaks her bones and Eleven restarts her heart. She talks about running through all of his memories until she hears the music and finds a way out, only to be stopped at the last second. Vecna finds her and chases her back through all of his own memories until Max runs into this cave memory and Henry stops. We can clearly see he's scared here. He's literally trembling. He's terrified and he runs away. Why doesn't he go into the cave system here to chase Max so he can finally eliminate her? What was so traumatic about this memory that is keeping him from going inside his very own memory? Well, the reason why many people don't know what they're referencing here with this important cave memory is because not everyone had the money to fly across the world to go watch the First Shadow prequel stage play in person. In the play, it tells us about Henry's traumatic experience he had in this very cave system, his first encounter with the Mind Flayer. For how important this is, I still can't believe they didn't release the full play on Netflix. So here's what I'm gonna do. We're going to break down and explain everything around this cave and why Henry won't go into it today in this full video, but after this, you have to go watch my full First Shadow stage play breakdown video because the Duffers just said in an interview that the play will come back and be even more important in the rest of this season, and you're going to want to make sure you're all caught up. I really appreciate all of the support and everyone who's been in the comments with me on all of these breakdowns as we go through Season 5 together. I've got a couple other videos that I'm working on at the moment, so make sure you're subscribed because you're not going to want to miss these next videos. Now, in Season 5, we see Max trapped in Henry's mind, and as she travels from the massacre at Hawkins' lab into Hawkins High School's picture day from 1959, she realizes that she's walking through Henry Creel's memories. And here we see a young Joyce Maldonado, which is her original last name before she married Lonnie. Max watches as she hands out flyers for the school play, Oklahoma. Now, from the First Shadow, we know they're not actually doing this play. This is a decoy play. Instead of doing this same play they do every year, Joyce decided to rebel and put on a new play without telling the principal. She's convinced a college arts program to send out a scout to watch the new play in hopes of getting a scholarship so she can move away and escape Hawkins. They're actually going to be putting on the play The Dark of the Moon, which Joyce tells us is a story of a witch boy who falls in love with a beautiful woman and sacrifices his powers in a bargain with the devil to be with her, only to doom them both. It's a story about the destructive power of fear and asks the question, can love defeat fear? Which is crazy because this question is the underlying theme of the entire Stranger Things show. We see constantly how to overcome fear with love. Mike literally saves Eleven from being overpowered by Vecna by just telling her he loves her. And music is what saves you from Vecna's curse. It's the one thing that can beat fear in this scenario. And on the play flyer, we see James Hopper Jr., Karen Childress, which is Mike's mom, Patty Newby, which is Bob's sister, and is literally the lead character in the First Shadow right next to Henry. This is so cool to actually see Patty Newby in the show. It also says Alan Munson, which is Eddie's father, and then Ted Wheeler, Mike's father, and finally, Henry Creel himself as the lead, as the witch boy with powers who makes a deal with the devil, aka the Mind Flayer. Now, just keep in mind that at this point in Henry's memory, the Mind Flayer is already inside of him. In the First Shadow, we learn that before moving here to Hawkins, the Creel family lived in Nevada. Specifically, they lived right near a military base that Dr. Brenner happened to be working at. Brenner was studying the results of Project Rainbow. This was a military experiment where they used electromagnetic energy to try to turn a full battleship invisible, and it worked. But instead of turning it invisible, they accidentally transported the ship to Dimension X. A Demogorgon ended up finding them and killing everybody except the ship's captain, who coincidentally was Dr. Brenner's father. And when the ship reappeared, Dr. Brenner's father was changed. While he was in the Upside Down, Mind Flayer particles infected him. Back in the real world, they were eventually able to extract these particles, and they kept them sealed in a lab to be studied. Eventually, a Russian spy was uncovered working on the project with Brenner. He stole the container and ran away trying to bring these particles to the Soviets. He didn't make it very far, and his body was found 2 days later near the exact cave system in Nevada. And when Brenner and his team found the body, the container was empty. The Mind Flayer particles were completely gone, but they did find a clue as to what might have happened. They found this. Henry Creel's Captain Midnight Spyglass. This was a toy that Henry Creel loved as a child. It was from the comic books that him and Patty would read that they ended up bonding over. And Brenner found it here next to the Russian's dead body at this cave system. Eventually, Dr. Brenner meets Virginia, Henry Creel's mother, and she told Brenner that Henry went missing for 12 hours near the time the Russian escaped. They ended up finding Henry near these caves with no memory of what happened, and Brenner deduced that Henry as a child might have stumbled across the container the Russian had, and just being a curious kid, he opened it. And in the stage play, since Henry has no memory of what happened, Brenner tries to push past this trauma block to unlock Henry's memory by pressuring him to face his fears. He brings out the spyglass that they recovered at the scene, trying to unblock his memory. They push him harder and put on this brain monitoring device that displays what he sees in his memories. And this is just like what he did with Elle in Project Nina. And we see through this that Henry was transported to Dimension X that day. Brenner refers to what was in the container as exotic materials, implying it was mind flare particles. And when Henry opened the box, they went inside of him and transported him to another dimension. And when Henry returned, he had the mind flare particles still inside of him, the same ones that were in Brenner's father. And then the first time that we know of that he used these powers was not long after, while they were still in Nevada. Henry killed one of his classmates' dogs, most likely a bully, and the kid came up to him the next day at school and pushes Henry to the ground and tells him he saw him kill his dog. Henry reaches out in defense and pops the boy's eyeballs. At least that's what happens on Broadway. In the original play in London, he breaks his arm and possibly a leg, putting him in a wheelchair. And that's the reason his parents decide to move to Hawkins, for a fresh start. But that won't matter. Henry brought the shadow with him to Hawkins. This cave memory is the moment Henry was first infected with the mind flare. This is just as traumatic to Henry as when it happened to Will. And just like Eleven had a repressed memory in season 4 that was psychologically preventing her from using her powers, this memory for Henry is so traumatizing for him that his brain is not letting him access it. He couldn't chase Max in here even if he wanted to. He will eventually have to do what we see Brenner make him do in the play. He makes him face this memory, and the moment this all started before he can invade Max's sanctuary. It's actually really smart that she ended up realizing this and using it as her safe haven, so she hasn't had to constantly run from Vecna through all of his memories for the last year and a half. But this cave memory, being traumatic, will definitely have to be explained in Volume 2, since they showed how significant it was. It plays such a big role in the story, being the only place in his mind that Henry can't go. And the Duffers have teased that they have been holding out on an even bigger spoiler that they specifically chose not to put in the play just so they could save the biggest reveal for the show. I'm not sure what they are referring to with this, other than possibly Henry is not all bad. I kind of wondered that while watching Volume 1. It seems like with the First Shadow, they're going to try to say that the Mind Flayer is the ultimate bad guy and it's just been using Vecna. I mean, they actually tell us that in the stage play, that the Mind Flayer is just letting Vecna use its powers to keep him distracted and to let it remain inside his mind, so it can keep using Henry as a host. This memory could be where Henry Creel, the boy, died essentially, the moment where he was forever changed, and ever since this moment, the Mind Flayer has slowly been taking over more of Henry Creel's mind and body. Originally, Henry was in control, and during the First Shadow, he was able to fight it. We see him actually defeat the Mind Flayer at one point and save Patty Newby, the girl he has a crush on. He saves her father from the Mind Flayer as it's trying to kill him. But even just by the end of the play, Henry loses a little more control and the Mind Flayer is more powerful inside of Henry. And it seems like as time continues to go on and then Henry physically gets trapped in Dimension X, the Mind Flayer inside of him continues to change him and take him over. Ever since then, he's slowly losing being Henry Creel and the Mind Flayer turns him into Vecna. Even when Nancy wounded him in season 4, he still had some of Henry inside of him. You could see one of his arms were still very human, and we could see that even more so when he was in season 1 taking over Will. But then we jump to 18 months later, he was healing and rebuilding his body in Dimension X, and in doing so, he rebuilt with more evil than human. Vecna's 2.0 look in season 5 is way more absent of anything human and just looks purely evil, like the Mind Flayer is slowly suffocating any good left of Henry Creel that might still be inside of him. The Duffer brothers have compared Vecna to Darth Vader, and as we know, in the end, Luke is able to to show his father love and spare his life after he defeats him. And as Vader is watching the Emperor torture his son, he snaps and the good in him takes back over and makes him turn on the Emperor. He sacrifices himself to defeat the person that manipulated him to the dark side. And there is a lot of parallels that we can draw to Henry Creel being turned to the dark side, as he's turned into Vecna. Originally, it was Brenner who manipulated him and pushed him to accept the Mind Flayer's control. Brenner was doing this so Henry could become powerful enough to open up a portal to Dimension X. But now that Brenner is gone, it's the Mind Flayer who's been manipulating Henry, getting him to do his evil bidding as they try to release the Mind Flayer onto the real world because it wants to conquer it. Vader turned to the light because of his love for his son, but right now Vecna doesn't have anyone that he loves. That is, in the show, until now. They've been teasing it for a while now, including one of the actors that is Patty in the play. But Patty Newby is the one person that Henry Creel loves. And since she's technically still alive, there's a good chance that she will be appearing in Season 5, and I wouldn't be surprised if she appeals to the good left in Vecna, and Henry's love for Patty will become stronger than his fear of the Mind Flayer. And she, or some form of love, will be strong enough to save Henry from the Mind Flayer's grasp. Because it would be so crazy to see him released from the Mind Flayer's grip. It would be wild to see Henry in one last final act sacrifice himself attacking the Mind Flayer to save Patty, or Eleven, or Will so that they can defeat the Mind Flayer. It kind of feels like Billy's redemption arc in Season 3. This is just a theory, but something that we will 100% be seeing more of in Volume 2. So make sure you go watch the full play breakdown video, and I'm going to start working on these other videos that I cannot wait to finish. Tell me what you think of Henry's trauma surrounding this cave memory, and I will see you in the comments. Peace.